Okay, now we should be ready to wind down on this introduction to the holistic, spiritual, magical, occult community. And I forgot I want to add something that is, you may or may not have heard of it, but it's good to know about. So, the last section of this, we're going to look, I may have mentioned wizardry and the craft. Gray School of Wizardry is an example. Witch School International is one source of the craft. You've got earth based traditions of religions and spirituality: neo paganism, Druidism, goddess worship, heathen, the Santeria, Voodoo, neo shamanism, Church of All Worlds, based on the book Stranger in a Strange Land by Heinlein, Dianic witchcraft, radical fairies, Native American spirituality. And I say that very carefully because there seems to be a pretty strong backlash from the true Native practitioners against some of this stuff going on. And then you've got like Ed Fitch's A Book of Pagan Rituals, some of the stuff I started out with. Um, these are magical traditions, but they also deal with being a practitioner of honoring Mother Earth. You can either call yourself worshiping Mother Earth, and in my case, I've taken the Buddhist vows, so my ultimate refuge is in the Dharma, but I honor and respect and work with gods and goddesses and spirits, and I honor Mother Earth. I am one of her servants in this way. So, earth religionists or earth based traditions tend to be this: we know Mother Earth is a conscious, sentient being. We know that, I mean, if you don't know what I'm talking about, look up Dr. James Lovelock's book, The Gaia Hypothesis. It should give you everything in a nutshell. Or if you can find it online, I don't know if it's available. I think he was going by the name Otter Zell at the time. But Oberon Zell wrote about the same time the Gaia Hypothesis came out in the scientific community. Oberon Zell wrote an article called The Gaia Theogenesis or something, about how Mother Earth was a conscious sentient being, but he wrote it from a more pagan viewpoint. So this is what a lot of the earth religion magical practitioners are, because it's all very much earth oriented. Getting into folk magic, and folk magic is an offshoot. I've tried to make this sort of logical. Excuse me, don't know if I succeeded. Unfortunately, my idea of logic isn't always anyone else's. Folk magic. You've got powwow. Powwow is a type of folk magic, I believe, practiced by the Pennsylvania Dutch. I've seen some of I've seen the pictures in the beautiful artwork you see on the barns. Rose mauling, I think, is what the Norwegians call it. But they've got symbols. They've got very beautiful, ornate Pennsylvania Dutch symbols representing things. You've got root magic, which I believe is a form of hoodoo. Um, what little I understand, so take it with a grain of salt. I believe voodoo is more the religious aspects, but hoodoo is sort of an offshoot because it's more practical. Because the material I have on hoodoo is very practical. Not so much about working with the deities or the divine. More, uh, you're in trouble with your boyfriend's left you, and it's very practical, but it's still very folksy and earthy. I've got some very wonderful friends who are sort of nicknamed Appalachian witches. I was taught by my grandmother, so that's another form of folky. And then, well, the Amish barn designs. Oh, and okay. Anyway, before I get away from here in the West, because believe it or not, most of the stuff I've talked about in all of these, you find here in America and in the West. But before we move to what I know of some of the other countries, I want to talk about something known as otherkin. If you're a fan of Doreen Virtue, she calls them earth angels, but I think the neo pagan movement has been calling them were people and otherkin for a lot longer. There's a book I've got, Lupa's Guide to Otherkin. Um, and then there's otherkin.net. Basically, what otherkin are, and they may or may not be a magical people. They may not practice magic, but it's still in ways a spiritual path. Somebody who's an otherkin, doesn't matter if they think they're dragonkin or if they think they're wolfkin or something, they have a human body, but they believe their soul is not human. And I discovered at the Grey School of Wizardry, most of the otherkin who were what were called Therian, or, you know, I met somebody whose husband believed he was actually a dog inside. And I'm not talking about dog just your as an insult, but he really believed he had a canine soul. And I've met people who believe they are elf inside and ogress. Therians are like wolves, any animal that we can, like cats, things like that. The thing that I found fascinating was most of the other kins I met that were Therian or reincarnated, shall we say, animal souls were endangered species animals that were going to law school. So my personal belief about otherkin is that they are manifesting for a reason. It's not just you don't fit with your neighborhood or something, but down deep, there's so many of us do not really connect with Mother Earth and her children very well. Therefore, in order to bring into our form of collective unconsciousness, Mother Earth or the spirit, whatever you want to call it, is starting to let humans be born with souls from other species to try to help our collective unconscious. Oh, I am still going to have to do another one because of the careful. Okay, and vampires can be considered here too. There's a whole, and it's not just the vampires who want to live the life. There are ethical, sanguine, and psychic vampires. Michelle Belanger helped, I think she helped write the book with Father Matthews called The Black Veil on how to be an ethical, sanguine, or psychic vampire. And that's a complete thing on its own. But they can be considered here because in ways it's a spiritual path, even if they don't practice magic. Because not all other can practice magic, yet it's in ways a form of spirituality. And so briefly, in Asia, you've got the Tibetan Buddhist and Bonpo. You've got Jainism, Hinduism, an Indian form of Buddhism. East Asia, you've got Zen, Taoism, the Shinto and Mikyo Buddhism of Japan. The Caribbean, of course, is Wudan. I've been told there's African forms of Wudan, and I know there's African faiths, and there's the Aboriginal faith down in Australia. I just don't know their formal names. And I am going to do one more of these, but it's going to be more about some of the groups I've run into that have been listed on some places as be very careful with. You know, some caveats. You may like this group, but make sure you don't have this background type thing. Plus, I'm going to get into Isaac Bonowitz's, he's got a very good cult evaluator form. So if you get involved with a group, you can go through his points and go, oh, if I get any more involved, I may have troubles leaving. So I'm going to move into that as the final part of this, which will also run into ethics. So